stand or sit? You're going to stand? Hey, Glenn, are we a hard stop at 2?
No. This section is 2, but we have another section that starts at 2.
Okay. I don't know. So can you try turning that off? Testing. A little bit. Test. I don't know where that's coming from. Yeah. Okay. No, I think it's okay. This is pretty strong. I mean, I can't believe you guys are shy to sit at the front. Patrick, there's a seat with your name on it at the very front. It said, I don't know, it says Patrick McDonald. I don't know what happened there. No, I'm kidding. Take your time. Okay, are we good to go? Okay, so that's can we back that up? Oh, sorry. Can I do this? Yeah, keep going. There we go. So Al, unfortunately, I don't have your handsome face on here, but I did steal a few pictures off the internet. Okay, thanks everybody for being here. We are going to spend about the next 50 minutes going through some things. I'm probably not going to buzz through. I had some intro slides to set the stage on this particular session, but you can see that we're really focused, as always, on advancing methane emission reduction activities, certainly in Alberta and in Canada and across the innovation technology ecosystem. We have a really exceptional group of folks, to be honest with you. We have, the way I look at it is we've got 4 pretty significant leaders. We have a leader in government, we have a leader in industry, we have a leader in networks, and we have a leader in technology. And is that better? You guys can hear me okay? So I won't do a whole lot of other introductions. Most of you know the folks here, but we're going to have a pretty good conversation after we listen to everybody talk about their role in the space of contributing to and evolving the methane ecosystem, and certainly its impact on innovation. So I just want to set the stage a little bit, just because I have a couple minutes here that I can go through this, if the slides will buzz for me. There we go. Okay, so we're going to address the 45% methane emissions reduction target. This is just this graphic is maybe a little bit old by a few months, so maybe there could be a new one out there that I haven't seen just yet. But this is largely what we'll anchor this around, is that we've been on this pathway towards a specific target, but of course the performance at this point seems to be exceeding what the expectation was, or certainly the timeline. And we're going to get to hear why that is with our group, because you've got a whole suite of reasons within our system. If we could advance the next slide, please, that have led us to this space. Now, when you look at methane specifically, what we look at are these 4 components primarily, which is detection, monitoring, mitigation, and reporting. Each of them is important. And I'm going to simplify just a little bit on the next slide into a little bit more common terms, which is let's find it, let's measure it, let's reduce it, and then let's report it. And so within each of these 4 pieces on the next slide, you'll see how innovation sits within the middle, because we require innovation at each of these 4 steps in order to really successfully achieve our target, exceed our target. And now what the expectation is, of course, is that we have to go farther, and the regulations are going to draw us there. But in every single case, we can point to different examples, and all 4 of find, measure, reduce, report. We can find very specific examples of innovation in technology and solutions. And each has been very significant for the sector as a whole to understand where the opportunities exist and minimize the risk associated with regulatory compliance, associated with stakeholder feedback, and when you combine that with industry's readiness to deploy, we've got a great system. But we need to be focused from the very front end on the innovation side all the way through to the deployment. So I think maybe I have just one more slide here to set the stage. This is where we look at our ecosystem. Certainly in Canada, we are very fortunate to have a very extensive ecosystem as it relates to methane mitigation, particularly from the energy sector. A lot of innovation, as we'll talk about, technology readiness. There are funding mechanisms that have been in place for years, and certainly we have a regulatory environment that's a driver as well. In every one of these cases, we require some pretty significant collaboration. And I have to say that certainly Alberta in particular, and I do say that because Kate is here, but Alberta has probably been the most efficient and impactful on the collaboration side between the technology providers, the industry, and all the other key stakeholders. So we'll hear a little bit about that from everybody. I hope this sets the stage. We have a very, very extensive, exhaustive ecosystem in Canada and Alberta, and it's proven to be, as we saw from the first graphic, a really great driver for performance from the sector. And so we'll talk about where the technologies are being developed and how we're getting them out into the system. So without further ado, Kate, if you could set a little bit of a framework from the Alberta government perspective, then we'll move on to Sohail, and then Joy will go with you online, and then Al, you'll finish us off from a tech side.
Voila. All right, so just to set a bit of context for those of you that may not know Alberta, like it's a relatively small population with a large industrial base and frankly energy expertise. And that includes oil and gas development and export. And so responsible development of those energy resources is frankly reflects local values of Albertans, but it also is frankly what's being demanded in any export of our energy resources. So methane reduction is an integral part of that. And just this spring, we released our latest climate and energy plan. It's called the Emission Reduction and Energy Development Plan. It's our 5th climate strategy in Alberta. We were the first province to have a climate strategy back in 1998. So this is number 5. And it's all about kind of continued action, continued results, and an outcome focus. But it really has 2 foundations. There's several foundations in it, but 2 that are probably most important to this panel. One, it's founded in actually getting clean technology and innovation over the line and adopted throughout our systems. And second, it's focused on working together. The government alone, industry alone, academia alone cannot get the results if we actually work together. So whether it's industry, technology and service providers in the space, investors, academia, Indigenous communities, this is how we work in our collaborative space. And in the space of methane, frankly, we've been doing this since the 1990s because, as I say, we are an energy producer and we want to be a very responsible energy producer. And we know putting our heads together will get better results. So for us, I just also want to note that we're here to talk about methane in oil and gas, but we don't limit our focus in this to oil and gas. We, of course, tackle methane in agriculture and wastewater, but we're going to focus our remarks today on the oil and gas sector. And so an important primer for us, and I think why I get to go first, is we set the policy frame. That's our job. We're not the investor. We're not the doer. We are the people that set the right frame to get the investment. And of course, we want things measured right and reported right. We want to be transparent, but ultimately we want reductions. And we're really proud when we get them cost effectively, when we get them in a timely manner and a deep manner. That's the goal in how we set our policy. So we certainly care about results. We certainly try to be outcome focused. And what we do in that policy framework, what we try to do is let entrepreneurs do what they do, let investors do what they do, let clean tech innovators do what they do, because that's not our role. Our role is to set the frame to enable them to get those results. So we have 2 prime regulations in Alberta with respect to methane reductions. And as Jackson mentioned, we set a target. We are the first province in Canada to do so, to set a reduction of 45% from 2014 levels by 2025. So it was an aggressive target. And we have 2 main regulations that we do that under. One's called the Methane Emission Reduction Regulation, quite obvious, but it sets a lot of requirements. Some are prescriptive, some are purposely flexible because it's really focused on letting the conventional upstream oil and gas sector do what it does, get the reductions. We recognize that there's a diversity of sites, a diversity of opportunities, and we're focused on the goal, which is to reduce those emissions. So some things are prescriptive, like we have some no bleed pneumatics at new facilities and the like, or defined vent limits for certain pieces. And some pieces are purposely very flexible, and that's quite unique in jurisdictions. So we look for saying we're calling for reductions on a fleet averaging across site or across sites. But we also underpin that with really strong MMRV. If we're not measuring right, it's really, really important that we are accurate in our measurement. But that too requires innovation. So we also allow some flexibility in our regulation because we want to get increased accuracy in order and reduce costs. We actually want competitiveness of our sector, and we just want a reduced cost mean more reductions. So we're happy about that. Our second regulation is the Technology Innovation and Emission Reduction Regulation, and it's our industrial carbon pricing and emissions trading system. So these emissions are priced in our system. The current price is $65 a ton. And what we do through that is again, an outcome-based regulation. It's got some flexibility, make reductions on site. There's incentive to go beyond your standards. There's carbon offset trading or payment to a fund that's invested in clean tech. And in this particular case, because methane and responsible oil and gas production is foundation for us, we have some protocols for people to go above our prescriptive standards. So whether it's pneumatic controllers, switching from pressurized methane to other sources like compressed gas or electrification, or whether it's engine fuel management and vent gas capture, we always want people to go above our standards and to get further reductions. And we've frankly seen much success in that. I think since we introduced those protocols, that we've seen over 7 megatons of reductions just come from the protocols alone. But we also take some of the money from our carbon pricing and invest it to support clean tech. And that's been important in the methane space as well. So to really support the tech space, we've got a few programs. I'm not going to mention many, but we have something called the Methane Technology Implementation Program. We call it MTIP. And this was to really look at new but yet to be really proven on site kind of emission reduction technologies. And we saw 103 projects with our $23 million investment. We have some like surface casing, vent gas capture and destruction. We have some electrification at remote sites and those types of things that are frankly very deployable outside Alberta as well. So we share the results of what we get. And those are projected over their lifetime to get 16 megatons of reduction. So 25 million for a 16 megaton reduction is pretty good. We also have the Alberta Methane Emission Reduction Program, or AMEP. I think we invested about $17 million there, but that was to look at alternative means to measure and monitor fugitive emissions at our oil and gas sites. And it'll also allow some application and testing of late stage technology adoption there. And what we also did was in our regulation, because great to say we're going to invest in it, but if you don't allow it in your regulatory system, kind of useless. So we have an alternative fugitive emissions management program that we allow in our regulation to allow our industry to deploy those pieces as well. And sharing that risk to say, no, we don't have to do it the same way. We are very committed to continuous improvement and we have to try new technologies. So I just thought I'd say our measurement, our reporting, our mitigation, all these efforts have been founded on literally decades of focus on this. We are not new to this game. We've been at this for some time. We want to be a responsible producer of oil and gas. We have several academic tech providers and companies that work in this space, so we're pretty lucky in that way. But we're also committed to these ongoing reductions. And so I'll state a little bit what we're doing next later, but my main thing is Jackson did show a graph that shows, I think a slightly dated graph. We don't have an updated graph, but we did release a report this week that says we actually met our target well ahead of schedule. So we met the 45% reduction from 2014 levels at the end of 2022. So we're not stopping there. It is continuous improvement, but maybe I'll leave that for later in the presentation.
That's perfect. Thanks, Kate. And Sohail, I don't want to age you, but you've been around a little while too in this space, hey? So we got lots to learn. We got lots to learn from Sohail on this. And I'll get out of the way here, Sohail, so you can come over here. And we'll talk. Let's just talk some more about your experience through the system since the 90s.
Now, can you hear me now? Okay, great, thanks. So thank you very much, Jackson. Yeah, I'm not that old, I mean, but anyways, what I would like to talk to you about is when you look at it, the most powerful tool that we have to fight the climate change is collaborative innovation. And for collaborative innovation, what we need to do, we need to have a perfect innovation ecosystem. And that would be something that we get everybody engaged, all the stakeholders. As Kate mentioned, we want the regulators, the policymakers, producers, technology providers, academia, and many more. So what I would like to do today, to talk about the PTAC innovation ecosystem, and then come and then dive into what we have done for methane, and present the methane innovation ecosystem. And then within that innovation, methane innovation, then there are a bunch of sub-innovation ecosystem that's going. One of them is CRIN, which essentially is a consortium of field testing facilities. So with that, I guess maybe you can change it for me. Okay, so PTAC is a not-for-profit, is an international and neutral organization. And we have been in business for over 27 years. We have 220 members. And these members, back please. Those members are actually big and small organizations. We have the largest clean tech companies essentially being our members. And they have done a marvelous job in terms of developing technologies to reduce methane emissions. Currently, 250 experts from industry are serving on our consortia. We have completed over 800 projects. We have over 100 research and development projects ongoing, and also held over 1,000 events. In terms of a scale of collaboration, over 400 producers provide funds for one of our programs on a voluntary basis because they see value in doing that. So let's now talk about the methane innovation ecosystem. So for methane, what we did, we started with a network, and this network actually is in collaboration with CRIN, the Clean Resource Innovation Network. We work together on that. It's about connecting people, ideas, projects, capital, because when you connect those things, that's how innovation will happen. It has a program called Applied Research. You are gonna hear about that program at 3 o'clock. This program, we have done close to 600 applied research programs, and the outcome are for producers, best practices, that they have reduced methane emissions and came with accurate way of measuring methane emissions, etc. But also the regulatory body and policymakers, they use this peer-reviewed applied research for development of smart policies and regulations. Those policies and regulations, they have the respect and trust of the public. Why? Because it's peer-reviewed and so is trustable. We come down and then we provide support to small and medium-sized enterprises. Those companies, we provide them with market fit analysis. From there, we would secure funds and sites for field testing their technologies. We help even increasing their market uptake of their technologies. You moved on, we are talking about what Jackson was talking about is methane detection, measurement, and reporting. For that, we have another area of activities which I describe later on. Then we move to the mitigation technologies. And for that, we start with developing those technologies. Then we have a facilities, it's actually over $1 billion lab and field testing facilities that is in collaboration with producers and 14 producers and 16 universities and research center. for at no cost to small and medium-sized enterprises, we field test their technologies, overcoming what we call the valley of death challenge. Then we move to increasing the market uptake of their technologies. We have another program, or couple of programs actually. What we do, we provide up to 75% cost of equipment and installment for technologies, and this way we give producers first-hand experience where then they can go buy those equipment and install it in a mass volume. Then we move up, and that is about exporting these technologies to various jurisdictions. And that's very important for us, because when you look at it, as Kate mentioned, we have developed 89 technologies that collectively can reduce methane emissions or has played a major role in reducing methane emissions by 45%. So 45% of 6% of Canada's greenhouse gas emissions related to methane emissions times 1.7%, which is Canada's greenhouse gas emissions globally, comes a small number. However, with those technologies and exporting them, we can actually make a big contributions globally with reduction of methane emissions. So we do trade missions, we do webinars, etc., to kind of export those technologies globally. So with that, I think I would like to move to the next slide, which is essentially for doing that, you have to have a vision. So we started working on methane emissions in 2008. Back then, very few organizations were aware of what methane is all about. It was colorless, odorless, out of sight, out of mind. We developed the first technology that currently is reducing enough greenhouse gas emissions equal to taking 170 cars off the road, but also making $20 million because we are essentially the methane that we are used to vent, now we are capturing and utilizing in the field to bring the field cost down. And that goes back to what Kate was talking about, bringing the cost down. We want to do things in an economic way, and through innovation, especially collaborative, we can do that. So we set a target of developing enough technologies to get to the 45% capacity. And that was supposed to happen in 2022. We actually made it happen in 2021, and rather than 45%, it's 48%. So our long-term vision is to reduce methane emissions by 2030 by 90%. Maybe I should correct myself saying that we are developing enough technologies that would have capacity that would reduce methane emissions by 90%. Because at the end of the day, we are not doing it. And we have proactive producers that they have already done it. And I think they are going to continue working on it too. So if I go to the next slide, please. This just shows the consortium that we created for field testing facilities. There are the 14 producers and 16 universities and research centers. And they are not all in Canada. There are some are in the US. And then the next slide, please. So where are we going from here? We have identified 6 sources of methane emissions. By going after those 6 sources of methane emissions, we can get the capacity to 75%. And that is our short-term goal. So with that, I think, I just want to ask Jackson to introduce the next speaker. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thanks. So you can hold on to that one, actually. Thanks, Sohail. Okay, so if we can get Joy on the line, it would be great to hear from you, Joy, on certainly your involvement personally and as an organization in innovation and the development of and deployment, frankly, of solutions throughout your operations, but really just getting a good sense of where you've been and where you see this going.
Sounds great. Jackson, thank you. Lindy, if you could start my slide deck, that would be awesome. And so I'm going to actually start with CRIN. And because in addition to being executive advisor of innovation at Canadian Natural, I am also the president of CRIN. And welcome all of you who are here today in our in our fantastic venue here in Dubai. So thank you. Next slide, please, Lindy. So again, Sohail was talking about vision and why is that so important, is so that Canada is a global leader in clean hydrocarbons from source to end use. And that is absolutely critical to us. So it's not, and as Sohail said, it's not just us that can use these technologies that are being developed, but they can be used by others. And it's not just others in oil and gas, it's others in other sectors. And, you know, Kate made reference to agriculture and other industries in Alberta. Obviously, these exist globally as well. And these technologies are not unique to deployment only in oil and gas. And so it is really important that we get this word about these, that others can learn from what we've done, and so that it's also end use can benefit from on its path to net zero. Next slide, please, Lindy. And this slide here is a little bit about CRIN. Since we've started, we're about 4 years old. We don't have the history that PTAC has, but why we exist is that PTAC has some wonderful sister organizations across our country. Also, the educational institutions that Sohail shared with you, our government research institutions, literally coast to coast to coast. And we had tremendous efforts in Canada to get this work done, but we were doing them in isolation. And what CRIN is about is to bring all of those efforts together. And it's also about not duplicating. And so why would we ever duplicate our methane efforts when we have PTAC? And so that's why PTAC is so closely our partner and is actually the methane execution arm for CRIN. And we build up those networks and support CRIN. Now, the network for CRIN now, the number there is 3,800. It's actually 4,500 since these slides were done up. And so growing very, very, very quickly. And I hope you can see the impact that we're having. Next slide, please, Lindy. This one is messy. Because innovation is messy and ecosystems are messy, and it's a whole lot of people that come together to do stuff. And so the next slide breaks it down just a little bit easier for you. And basically, we have 19 sectors that we come together under, and we've actually grouped those to make it easier even for us to be able to communicate and work. And those are adopters, funders, innovators, support services, and so important, talent builders. Because without the next generation coming to do this work, where are we? We're nowhere. So super important that we have that talent stream coming in. CRIN focuses in 7 different theme areas, of which methane monitoring, quantification, and abatement is one. Cleaner fuels, digital oil and gas, low emissions, value-added products, novel hydrocarbon extraction, novel land and well site reclamation, and water technology development. Next slide, Lindy, please. So we have been very happy as CRIN to support PTAC and the work that they're doing. So we've done 1.5 million in a portfolio of 7 projects. So the types of things that Sohail's been sharing with you: methods for estimating emissions from tanks, again, rate-based emissions correlations and thresholds, quantification of transient methane venting, evaluation of surface casings and vent flows, and evaluation of quantitative tools. Now, how do we do that? Is we also have several events together with PTAC, and these are all of our events always have a virtual component. Sometimes they have a physical component. Even this event, you can watch virtually in Canada or anywhere around the world as it's happening, and the webinars are saved, and you can go to our network and see these at any time. And the other thing that now you're in Dubai that we hope you will come to Canada is for the Methane Leadership Summit that PTAC hosts together with CRIN every year. It's in beautiful Banff, and I saw the pictures here that you saw. So just a little taste of what's around. And so please come, and it's amazing. Get really into the detail of things. Why? Because we want to make sure that that widespread adoption takes place. So super important that we all learn from each other, and that's the kind of detail that's at that conference that you can bring something home and really make a difference. Next slide, Lindy. Why is this also important? So wearing my Canadian natural hat, since 2016, in 2022, we achieved 50% reduction in methane emissions. As you can see, our target, like the province, was a little bit later, and we too, because of the way that we work together, we were able to achieve these targets earlier. We are an active member since PTAC's inception and have participated in, and a lot of the pilots that have been talked about here have been on our sites, and that's what's helped us to do this. And so we actually have 10.4 million tons of CO2 equivalents conserved since 2018 in our primary heavy oil, crude, and in situ operations, and 815,000 tons of CO2 equivalents reduced to date from pneumatic retrofits and removals since, again, 2018. And these, of course, are over thousands of wells and sites. So how, again, we talk about working together. Please join CRIN and hop into, you'll see around you, our ecosystem, because it is immense, and it is not just for Canadians. A little more difficult to get Canadian funding if you're somewhere else, but there's a lot more to it than funding. So please consider joining CRIN, where we can highlight this fantastic work, and you can get onto the inside of it as well. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Joy. That was a great overview of CRIN. Certainly, I was waiting for somebody to show that web network that you have there, because it's, and I appreciate the simplified version as well, but really unique structure and very supportive of the innovation environment. So speaking of innovators, a gentleman that has also been around a couple of years in this space, I would say, starting his venture into environmental solutions in I guess it would have been in the 80s. Hey, Al. But he's leading an organization that is very active in the methane mitigation space, certainly in Alberta and Canada, and looking at some of the export opportunities, as Sohail has mentioned, and certainly taking advantage of them. So Al, a little bit about your story, and then we'll have the last 10 minutes here for questions. No, go ahead. Down there is great. Yeah.
Is it on? Great. First of all, thank you to CRIN and PTAC for the invitation. I found out about this this morning, hence no picture and no slides, so you have that benefit. I'm going to be speaking today about, and I'm going to reference what we have done as one example, my company has done as one example of one of the verticals in methane emission reduction. You heard people talk about surface casing vent flow reduction, tank venting, tank VRUs. There's a whole range of things. I'm involved in pneumatic, gas-powered pneumatic instrument replacement, in our case with solar chemical injection. When you talk about the innovation network, I started about 2008. In fact, I was drawn into the energy sector because we had taken permanent magnet motor technology, the same motors in hybrid cars and electric cars, and adapted that to solutions in the energy sector to create energy efficiencies and greenhouse gas reductions. I didn't invent solar chemical injection. They were doing that down in the US. One of my biggest problems when I was drawn into this was the fact that we had to overcome the fact that most solar chemical injection systems failed in Canada in a cold climate. And so the technology, the involvement was to take a super efficient motor that could create an environment where you could have smaller solar panels, fewer batteries, a more economic proposition. But as part of, again, as an example of how you grow a technology, so nothing has fundamentally changed. It's a lot better now than it was 10 years ago, but it didn't happen overnight. We were a clean tech company before anybody started using those terms. And it wasn't until, as things started going and we started to get industry adoption, the bottom fell out of the oil patch and we were in the doldrums for quite a while. So it was not until more recently that things started to happen, but was concurrent with this was all of the work that was happening in the province with the leadership by the province of Alberta. The work in methane, and I've literally traveled around the world and I've made presentations about what we have done in Alberta. And I can say, absolutely, I have not seen an example where that combination of policy and regulatory framework in conjunction with an environment with a carbon offset system that was the first in North America has created an opportunity to actually do things. One of the problems I have when I go around the world is I hear a lot of talk about methane, but very little is actually done. So I'm just going to give you an example. I'm going to use my company as an example. I'm not the only supplier of this technology in Alberta. I've got about 4 competitors. I can only speak to what we have done. But that combination of the policy and regulatory framework and the enabling environment with a carbon offset system allowed our company to progress. And frankly, the outcomes are really quite significant. One of the other, before I get into that, one of the other things that we deal with methane emission reduction is that it's not sexy. So Hill said, you don't see it. There's no big smokestack up there that can frighten people, especially when it's, a nighttime scene and filtered a few times to make it look really bad. You can't see it. It's all over the place. It's not one big project. It's not like carbon capture and storage where you can spend billions on a project. That gets the attention of CEOs. Replacing a pump doesn't get the attention of CEOs. But so what happened with us? We have placed now through our distributor in Canada, mostly in Canada, some in the US, over 6,000 systems. We did 4,000 up to 2022. And in 2022 alone, we did 2,000 systems. Most of those got carbon offset, and those were just through a bunch of small, medium, and large producers. Most of those were financed through carbon offsets over the last 3 or 4 years, and that's why the dramatic increase in adoption. We have to verify those, so we have to measure. This is not an estimate, this is a measurement of carbon reduction, and it has to be verified and then approved to get an offset. So this is real stuff. 2,000 systems, 2022, at roughly 150, average 150 tons per system, that works out to 300,000 tons of carbon. That's one company's system, technologies deployed in Alberta. That's roughly 1/3 of the $1.35 billion Shell Carbon Quest carbon capture and storage plant. One company. We have 6,000 systems roughly out there operating. That's about 900,000 tons of carbon. That is almost the same as a carbon capture and storage plant. But it's 6,000 projects, 6,000 wells in Alberta. It doesn't get the attention, but the impacts are huge. And you could apply this through a lot of the other technologies as well. The impacts of methane emission reduction are huge. So this is just one example, and it's why it's so critical that we take this into other markets. And we can talk about that later if you want.
That's great. Yeah, thanks so much, Al. It's a great case study of an organization that's kind of grown up and seen the growth as a result of the system that we have in Canada and Alberta. So I'm going to have a couple questions here for folks. Hopefully we can get through them. If there's anything pressing from anybody here, then throw up your hand or throw a pen at me or something, and we can have you guys ask a question. But Kate, let's just talk about what's next. What's next in methane mitigation in Alberta, and what more can we do, and what's the direction for the province?
Yeah, so maybe what's also important to say and what's next is what will stay the same. And I think because if you're successful, you want to keep doing some things the same. So we do look at, we want to continue with a regulatory environment that enables flexibility like carbon offsets or looking at fleet averaging and the like. We want to remain outcome based. We want to remain flexible. We want to use a combination of regulations, offsets, and incentives, as well as invest in programs to support that. But what's changing will be our number. As I say, meeting a target early, very proud of it, but we don't stop there. And so we, in our emission reduction and energy development plan that we released in the spring, we did commit to working again with industry, with academia, with Indigenous, with the NGOs and everybody to explore if we can get a pathway to 75 to 80% by 2030. And also in conjunction with that to continuously improve in the measurement reporting and continue the transparency approach that we have. So that's one real piece of ours, but we're also not just looking, we focus a lot on Alberta. We are looking internationally, not only to share the lessons learned, because that, I mean, foundation of the Paris Agreement is actually supporting each other and driving emission reductions faster, but also frankly for us to continue to learn. Many people are working in this space now with lots of technology. So we want to certainly make sure that we not only keep up, but stay ahead. And we're really proud of that. So I will leave it there.
Yeah, I love that, Kate. It's there's always something to learn, and how do you stay in front of it to maintain a leadership position? It's great news to hear about that approach. So we talk a lot about the collaborative efforts that have taken place in order to get us here, and we certainly talk about a lot of the collaboration happening with CRIN. But can you maybe touch on a little bit more how your view on small scale collaboration, large scale collaboration, and really how you manage that? Because different situations are going to require different levels of collaboration, but do you find that you can still get to the same success point at the end of it, regardless of how you approach it, the collaborative efforts?
Yeah, yes. Our experience is that when we increase the number of people that we want to collaborate, of course, now we have to consider all of their needs, what they want. There may be conflict in terms of where they want to go. We call it herding cats and sometimes herding tigers. But the bottom line is that if we get it to expand it, then the impact is going to be significantly higher. When I have several examples of what we have done in terms of large scale collaboration that has been extremely helpful. One example was on CCUS project. We had essentially government of Australia, the US government, federal government, our own provincial government, 30 producers. They all came together and worked together on a big projects to reduce the cost of doing CCUS, which was extremely successful. The financial leveraging was something like 1 to 120, meaning if a company provided $1, they got $120 worth of research and development. So again, you gotta be patient, and you gotta be working with diverse group, but it's very rewarding to go with large scale collaboration. And that's something we are trying to do now, essentially working with numerous international organizations. And I just want to invite any of you to come and join us in terms of working together.
Thanks, Sohail. All right, Joy, hopefully we can dial you back in on this one. I would love to hear a little bit about how you feel the role. So trust is critical throughout this whole process, and relying on appropriate information that's being communicated. So what role does collaboration play in the trust of information that we put out there? There's a lot of success stories that we have. There's a lot of great case studies that we can talk about. And how important do you see, and perhaps maybe this is why we have such a large network within CRIN, because you need a lot of stakeholders at the table in order to gain that trust through the process. So can you maybe talk a little bit about that?
I think what you just said is super important. Networks work because there's trust in the first place, where you have to build that trust. And then what's super important with respect to the data is you have so many different ways of coming at and measuring that data, or people that confirm that data and verify it. And so it's not just a singular voice. As you saw, we had 19 sectors inside of CRIN, and it takes all of those coming together to actually bring technology forward through. But Kate mentioned what we've done in Alberta is you have the standard systems, and in parallel, we pilot along next to a standard system. And so the numbers have to jive and prove themselves. And that's not just over a few wells, it's literally over thousands of wells. And so you build these incredible databases that are just not, numbers aren't just checking themselves in one way. It's really good science. They check themselves in many different ways. And so I think that that's what's super important. And it's really unique. Like, as we are negotiating these relationships with the different entrepreneurs, and they're coming together on literally the same sites and comparing their technologies one to the other. At first it was really very difficult. It took a while to negotiate those contracts. It was painful, actually. But what it then ended up happening is they actually support each other in that verification of those numbers. And some of them, we actually have it from satellites to fixed wing to ground to drones to balloons, in this level of, and then the ground measurements that are all there. So it takes a lot of people. It comes together. It takes an immense amount of coordination, and it's work over years collaboratively together. And it doesn't happen without trust, and that the entrepreneurs can grow and their technologies come to fruition, and they are marketed not just to us, but to others and around the globe. So it's pretty impressive work.
That's great, Joy. Thank you. And so let's continue on the thread of trust and data and communication about the case studies. Maybe, you just got back from Brazil a handful of days ago and flew to Calgary for a short shower and then came over here. But are there some, how do you gain their trust? Is it just because you have 6,000 units in the field? Is it because you're an Alberta-based company? What are some of the common threads that you hear when you're traveling into these other jurisdictions looking at export opportunities?
Sure, Jackson. I think it's part of almost all of what you said. When you go around the world, by and large, knowledgeable people in the oil and gas sector have a lot of respect for Canada, for Canadian technology. They have a broad-based understanding. What they don't, and what the environment that they're operating in often doesn't have in place the kind of policy and regulatory framework that we have. So a big part of what I do, I mean, I ultimately have to monetize what I'm doing. I want to actually sell the technology, but I'm in the business. I got into this business because I wanted to have something that I could do good things, make a positive impact. So yeah, I want to sell, I want to monetize, but I also realize that in many of these environments, they're starting from square one. And so when I talk to them about, and I spoke to some of the largest natural gas producers in Brazil, some of the largest offshore or onshore oil and gas companies, there's a whole new environment evolving there. And it's just microcosm what's happening in Argentina and Colombia and other places. what we have to start by doing is saying, you don't have to make the same mistakes we did. Here is how you can create an enabling environment. Like, it took us a while. It didn't all just happen. How do you create an enabling environment? So it's talking to government officials as well, but helping them to understand that you can take these experiences, what our companies went through, and accelerate that path. So this is seeding at this point in almost all of those markets. We're not going to come anywhere close to achieving what we're achieving here in Canada right now. It'll take time, just like it took time in Canada to get to where we are right now. But what we really need, and I'm encouraged, Kate, to see that Alberta, that the government is looking outside of Alberta. I can tell you the single biggest thing we could do for the environment would be to bring the rest of the world, in terms of not just policy and regulation, but implementation as well, up to our standard, or even close, or best in class standard. If we can bring others up to that, that's when you're going to have a big impact. And that's where I think we really need to start taking our technologies outside of Alberta. And by the way, when I do that, I'm not just taking mine. I've got a number of other Alberta companies that are in this space that fit nicely. And we're going in as a team to do this. And I would encourage, and, I'd encourage the government to continue to work in that way.
Well, thanks, Al. That was great. And so we're not going to give you your last 60 seconds or less, but everybody else will give you each 60 seconds or less to wrap up a little bit about maybe what it could be something. What do you want to get out of COP this year? Or what message do we want to leave folks with that drives a little bit of energy into the system to make sure that we continue to strive for greater action?
Maybe I'll go fast. I mean, we're really proud of the results that we achieved, like really proud. And I say we collectively, our industry, our academics, our tech providers, etc. But going into COP, we're not done. So it's a little bit of a small, proud moment, but it's put your head down and keep going. That's very Albertan too. Get her done, and it's going deeper, further, faster.
Sohail.
Well, I would say the biggest challenge that we are facing with respect to climate change, etc., essentially requires collaboration. And actually requires global collaboration. So what I'm saying is that I want to invite all of you to come and join us to work it together to solve the problem. Because of what happened in Alberta, for example, with support from the policymakers, regulatory bodies, producers, technology providers, this is what we have achieved. Imagine if we do it globally. Thanks.
Joy, last word to you, young lady.
So we formed CRIN so that we could focus people, focus money, deliver quickly. We need to accelerate the rate at which we're working. Please join us. Join CRIN, join these wonderful people, and help us deliver.
Excellent. Last chance to throw a pen at me. No takers. All right. Round of applause, please, for our panel. Thank you, guys.